For more than 3 decades, Somaliland existed in a unique position. It maintained its own government, it held elections, it built institutions, it developed security forces. And yet, despite all of this, it remained largely outside the formal international system. For years, the world paid little attention. But suddenly, that began to change. Meetings with foreign leaders, new diplomatic offices, growing international partnerships, global headlines, regional controversy, and questions that could shape the future of the Horn of Africa. Tonight, we examine the remarkable story of Somaliland's latest diplomatic efforts and why the world is paying attention. This is not just a story about politics. It is a story about identity, recognition, power, geography, and the future of an entire region. To understand what is happening today, we must travel back through history. Long before the current diplomatic developments, Somaliland occupied an important position along one of the world's most significant maritime corridors. Ships crossing between Europe, Asia, and the Middle East passed nearby. Trade flowed through the region. Empires competed for influence. Colonial powers established control. The modern political history of Somaliland emerged from this complex environment. The territory experienced periods of cooperation and conflict. Eventually, new political realities emerged. As Somalia entered prolonged instability in the early 1990s, Somaliland declared independence and began constructing its own institutions. Many observers expected failure. Instead, something different happened. Local leaders negotiated. Communities participated. Institutions gradually developed. Challenges remained, but stability increased. And while international recognition did not arrive, governance structures continued to evolve. This became one of the most remarkable political experiments in modern Africa. Recognition is more than symbolism. It affects economics, diplomacy, investment, international cooperation, travel, trade. Every government seeks legitimacy. For Somaliland, obtaining recognition became a central objective. Year after year, officials traveled abroad. Diplomatic meetings took place. Partnerships were developed. Relationships were strengthened. Yet recognition remained elusive. Why? Because many countries feared setting precedents that might encourage separatist movements elsewhere. Others prioritized Somalia's territorial integrity. This created one of the most difficult diplomatic challenges in the world. How does a territory persuade the international community to change a position maintained for decades? The answer Somaliland believed was patience, persistence, and strategic partnerships. The global political landscape has changed dramatically. Competition between major powers intensified. New economic corridors emerged. Maritime security became increasingly important. Technology transformed diplomacy. Countries began seeking reliable partners in strategic regions. Suddenly, places once considered peripheral gained new significance. Somaliland's location became increasingly important. The Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, major shipping routes, critical trade corridors, all converged near Somaliland. As international competition increased, strategic geography became more valuable than ever. This changed calculations in capitals around the world. One of the most discussed developments involved Taiwan. The relationship attracted attention because both entities face unusual international diplomatic situations. Officials on both sides emphasized cooperation. Educational exchanges expanded. Technical cooperation increased. Representative offices were established. Supporters described the relationship as practical and mutually beneficial. Critics viewed it differently. Regardless of perspective, the partnership generated international headlines, and it demonstrated Somaliland's willingness to pursue unconventional diplomatic opportunities. This would become a recurring theme. Then came another development that captured international attention. Relations between Somaliland and Israel moved into the spotlight. Meetings occurred. Diplomatic discussions intensified. Observers debated the significance. Supporters argued these developments represented a breakthrough. Critics warned of geopolitical consequences. Media coverage expanded across multiple continents. For Somaliland's leadership, every new relationship represented another opportunity to increase international visibility. The strategy appeared increasingly clear: build partnerships, increase engagement, expand international presence, create momentum, and gradually reshape global perceptions. As Somaliland expanded its diplomatic outreach, reactions quickly emerged from across the world. Some governments watched carefully. Others expressed concern. Regional organizations began discussing the potential consequences. For many observers, the issue was no longer only about Somaliland. It had become a wider geopolitical debate. Questions emerged. Could Somaliland's diplomatic strategy alter political dynamics in the Horn of Africa? Could it influence future recognition discussions? Would other countries eventually follow similar paths, or would resistance remain strong? These questions became the focus of international attention. The government of Somalia continued to maintain its long-standing position. Officials emphasized Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. They argued that Somaliland remains part of Somalia under international law. From Mogadishu's perspective, diplomatic actions appearing to treat Somaliland as a separate state create significant concerns. For decades, Somalia's position has received broad international support. As a result, every diplomatic breakthrough claimed by Somaliland generates intense discussion. The disagreement remains one of the most important political questions in the Horn of Africa, and despite years of debate, no final resolution has emerged. The African Union has traditionally been cautious regarding border changes. Many African leaders remember historical conflicts connected to territorial disputes. Because of this history, the AU often prioritizes stability. Supporters of Somaliland argue their situation is unique. Critics argue that recognition could create wider complications. This disagreement explains why the issue remains so controversial. Yet despite differing views, almost everyone agrees on one thing: the future of Somaliland matters, not only for Somaliland itself, but for the entire region. To understand why major powers are paying attention, we must look at a map. Sometimes geography changes everything. Somaliland sits near one of the world's most important maritime corridors. Millions of tons of cargo pass through nearby waters every year. Energy shipments, consumer goods, industrial equipment, food supplies, global commerce depends on these routes. This makes the region strategically valuable. The port of Berbera has become increasingly important. Infrastructure projects have expanded. Investment has increased. Logistics networks continue developing. Supporters believe Berbera could become one of the region's major commercial hubs. If successful, the port could strengthen trade connections across Africa and beyond. Economic development often follows infrastructure, and infrastructure often attracts additional investment. This creates a cycle that can transform entire regions. Security remains a major consideration. International shipping depends on safe maritime routes. Governments around the world monitor developments closely. Any region located near critical trade corridors naturally receives attention. This reality explains why diplomatic developments in Somaliland are being followed not only in Africa, but also in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and North America. Politics often dominates headlines, but economics may ultimately determine the future. Imagine increased foreign investment, new businesses, improved infrastructure, expanded trade, growing employment opportunities. These are among the possibilities frequently discussed by supporters of Somaliland's international outreach. Yet opportunities alone do not guarantee success. Economic progress requires stability, investment confidence, strong institutions, long-term planning. The challenge is transforming diplomatic momentum into practical development. That is where the real test begins. Perhaps the most important element is the younger generation. Across Somaliland, young people are watching these developments closely. Many hope greater international engagement could create opportunities in technology, business, education, and entrepreneurship. The future of any nation depends on its youth, and the aspirations of young Somalilanders may ultimately